And good evening with Ridgecrest Talk, your host Paul VanderWerf. Tonight's guest, Jerome Weber, who's a local rock climber, and we're going to talk about a real freestyle, get out in the wild type of activity, rock climbing today. And Jerome, why don't you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, my name is Jerome Weber. I've been climbing for about 16 years. I have 2 or 3 really solid years of experience. The previous couple of years I climbed in 150 to 160 days a year. I grew up in Ridgecrest.
It's kind of the basics there, right?
That's the basics.
Yeah, a lot of us moved here when we're small kids. You moved here, what, you're about 8 years old?
I was 8 years old when I moved to Ridgecrest.
And so I had a lot of activities when I was a kid growing up. I was always like your typical kid running around and always being challenged, going out, whether it's lizard hunting or whatever we have here in the desert. What was your first experience that led you towards rock climbing?
So when I was probably 10 years old, I was at Fossil Falls, a local climbing area, with my family, and we were just out for a hike, and we ran into some local climbers, and the next thing I knew, they threw harness and shoes on my dad, and he was up there climbing. I thought that was the coolest thing, watching my dad climb. He'd never done it before. And he started going out with these locals, and I would go with him, and now I'm still climbing to this day. So,
all right, now for a lot of us, like Fossil Falls, if you had asked me when I was a teenager, I wouldn't know where that was. Now, of course, more recently I did go hiking up to Fossil Falls, and it is an amazing place. For those of you not familiar, it's up to 395, probably, I'm guessing, what, 25, 30 miles altogether? Because, of course, you're going up through Inyokern, 395 north. The Fossil Falls sign is right there on the road. It's off on the east side. And if you understand the geology and the geography of the area, I think they said like 30,000 years ago that the Owens River was flowing down into China Lake, and that would go over to Trona. And then through the volcanic activity that's come across that waterway, there was a time when the water stopped, but it was still going through Fossil Falls, and it created some real wonderful rocks and some real visually unusual areas up in there. And so originally you went there with your family just hiking, and then you saw some people from the area that were mountain climbing, and before you know it, you guys were hooked into that as well.
Yep, yep.
And so how did that continue? You're what, about 10 years old?
So I was about 10, yeah.
And so you'd continue to go out a few times a year? Or?
Oh, probably once every week or two, until I left Ridgecrest at 16. I graduated high school and then went to college, and that's when I got my first pair of climbing shoes. So I started climbing about twice a week down in San Diego.
Okay, so growing up, you started to learn a passion, and then in college, while you were attending college, you continued that passion where you were going to school. Where did you go to college?
I went to the University of San Diego.
All right, so down in a little bit more beautiful ocean setting than China Lake, but still, China Lake and Ridgecrest does have wonderful rocks. I remember going out to Bee Mountain in that front area. We used to call it Chuckwalla Hill. I think nowadays the kids probably can only go there on a special outing that's supervised, because that's all fenced off now. But besides going up to Fossil Falls, what are some of the other areas that are enjoyable here in the area?
Some of my favorite areas are Speedway Corridor, No Name Canyon up by Pearsonville, Wagon Wheel is an amazing bouldering area. Great Falls out of Trona is a really nice place to go rock climbing, beautiful granite. And, you know, sometimes we get up as far as Lone Pine and Bishop for longer trips. But
all right, and then trying to think, Trona is another area that I've gone to, but there's certain areas that you don't experience, like the petroglyphs. Everybody talks about, oh, you got to go see the petroglyphs. I'm always driving by going, well, there's the petroglyphs over there on the right. Trona, of course, is about 30 miles east of Ridgecrest. And when you're going to areas like that, are there restrictions? Are you able to climb anywhere, or do they have certain places that are off limits?
No, there's no really places that are off limits. I mean, unless it's on private property, you're allowed to pretty much climb anywhere.
Okay. And so, you know, sometimes I've talked with people and they get the impression that outdoor activities is going to be overly using the space and is going to, you know, as a conservationist, we don't want people out. How do you guys deal with that as rock climbers? Are you being sensitive to the environment and, you know, how you're placing your equipment and so forth? How does that come into play?
Yeah, most of the time, like in wilderness areas, there's no motorized equipment, so we can't use drills to put in bolts or anything like that. So we try to just stick it to some passive gear. And you know, in the springtime when there's birds nesting around, we try to stay away from those areas when we notice them. But other than that, I don't think there's anything else we really need to.
So a lot of it's common sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key is when I talk to hunters, when I talk to fishermen, even the folks at the Audubon Society, there's a real caring that you know, people that are looking at birds are still planting trees. People that are hunting are still wanting to take care of the water sources for the animals. And it seems like the same type of thing. If you're rock climbing, you still want to be out there. You don't want to be rock climbing indoors all the time. You want to be out in the environment. Now, obviously, you know, there's a number of places around here. Is there a rating scale? How do you determine, like, if I'm a beginner versus an experienced person? How do you guys rate those types of rocks?
So the ratings can vary. It's based on a number scale, 5 dot, and then another number. So a 5.5 or a 5.6 or a 5.7 would be something typically easier that most novices could climb, most beginners can climb. And then as you get up to 5.8 or 9 and 10, it gets a little bit more difficult, and anything over 10 is pretty hard. And the hardest one at the moment is 5.15 or something like that.
5.15?
Yeah.
All right, so if I'm starting out like a 5.4, would
yeah,
probably be something that I'd be looking at?
Anywhere 5.4 to 5.7 is perfectly safe.
All right, so there is a rating scale. There is kind of some general rules and guidelines. Now, as far as identifying where those locations are, besides finding somebody who already knows, is there a way to find those? Is there a book, or is it on the internet?
You know, the Todd's Outdoor Supply has the Domelands Wilderness Guidebook, which has all of the local areas in it, most of the local areas in it. Other than that, it's find a climber and ask him to take you out.
All right, and so Todd's Outdoor Equipment is right there on Ridgecrest Boulevard. It's a place I went to as a kid. And we're going to talk some more after this break. This is Paul VanderWerf with Ridgecrest Talk. And welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk. Your host, Paul VanderWerf. We're talking about rock climbing, going out, and one of the things they say about Ridgecrest, I know we had this big sign for a long time as you drove in the freeway, it says Ridgecrest Rocks. And I think the reference may have been to the petroglyphs as far as the rocks, but it's also, we have a lot of rock climbing. And so we're here with our guest, Jerome Weber, talking about some of the different aspects of rock climbing. We were just talking about Todd's shop. What is the exact name? You know, is it Todd's
Outdoor Equipment?
Outdoor Equipment.
Outdoor Supply.
Right there, Ridgecrest Boulevard. I mean, it's been there since I was a kid. I remember getting camping gear there, getting my boots there. Back in the days when you had one sporting goods store, which was Triangle at the front gate. You had one shoe store, which was Corny's, and you had your Outdoor Supply at Todd's. And there's not too many of those left. There's only a few of those stores, but that's one that just has a huge amount of information available. And you're talking about getting maps. So what are the types of things that you would get at the Outdoor Supply?
Chalk. They have some webbing and some ropes, and mainly chalk and a guidebook. climbing guidebook.
What do you do with chalk? Is that for your hands?
That's for your hands. So when you're out there, the rocks can be warm. You know, you're working hard, your hands are going to sweat, and it'll be really slippery on the rock. So you use the chalk to dry your hands.
So it's like if you're shooting pool or if you're rock climbing, you're going to have some chalk.
Same thing, right?
Or pitching baseball, I guess would be the other one. Well, I see you brought a little bit of equipment. Let's just kind of see a little bit of what you have, just to get an idea of what are some of the tools of the trade here.
Absolutely. So right here we have a alien cam. It's a Camelot that is a little bit of active protection that you can place in a crack and clip your rope to it to keep you safe.
And that just locks right into the crevice if it's the right size. So you're basically looking at about an inch or less than an inch, right? And then that was going to work right in there and lock it in. And then once that's locked, you're going to tie your rope through the carabiner.
Yep.
And then sounds like you always want to make sure you're taking care of your own gear when you're being responsible. Or I guess if I was the new guy, I'd want you to make sure you're taking care of it, so I wasn't making a mistake. But that does seem pretty important. What else do you have there today?
So I have some nuts or some chocks, which are passive. They just slide right into the crack. They're kind of wedge-shaped, so they don't. So you can fit them in there real nice, and these are really bomber.
So you have actually just different sizes. You have the real small ones for a real small space, and then you have much larger ones depending.
Yep, depending on the size of the crack, and yeah, these are super safe.
And so you're basically you're wearing a harness or a belt?
Yep, I got a harness here. I wear a harness. I got too much gear on it, but the harness will keep you safe. It's just a waist harness, and it's got leg loops. And,
so when you go out to hike, do you just grab that belt with all that gear and you're ready to go?
Yep, I just grab it and go out.
All right, so it's really not that much gear when you look at it, because your shoes are on there, your harness, you have a whole bunch of different equipment for different situations.
Shoes, harness, chalk bag. I probably got only 25% of the gear I would actually bring with me.
Okay, so you just grab some of the stuff that.
So I only grabbed some of it, yeah.
Because your ropes and that are going to take up.
And the ropes a lot, yeah. You'll have a 50 pounds worth of gear to take up with you when you're going on a climb.
All right. Is there anything unusual or anything else there in your gear that we want to make sure we take a look at?
Just a helmet. Always wear your helmet.
Now that looks like well, it's pretty lightweight. It's kind of your typical. I know when we do softball games, we always look to make sure it has the official stamp to make sure it's safe. And I'm sure with these, you've tested those out. This looks like it would really do well, because you're concerned with things falling on top of you, like equipment or rocks.
Mainly rocks. Like if your buddy's climbing above you, he's going to knock a rock down on you.
That'd be pretty common, I would think.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the secret is don't look up. Is just get that helmet where it's going to protect you, right?
Yep.
We say the same thing in softball. The catcher has all this gear on, and the ball comes, and your natural reaction is to turn and look away, and then it's going to hit you where you're not protected.
Yep.
But you want to get your equipment facing the best way so that you're safe when something like that happens. Now, obviously you want to get the right equipment, you want to get with the right people, and you want to get the proper training. Obviously we can go down and we can look the part, get all this gear on, and you always see when I think the river runs through it with Robert Redford, the guy comes out fishing and he has no clue what he's doing, and they just look at each other. It's like, do I have to take this guy fishing? He looked the part, but he really didn't know what he's doing. And I think with rock climbing, you don't want to be in that boat where you got all the gear and you run out there and you're going to be probably the first one who's coming back to the emergency room because you did something dumb. What do we do if we want to get training in rock climbing?
The best thing I can recommend locally is to take the CLMRG summer class that they offer every summer, and they teach you everything about being in the mountains and how to stay safe.
Right. Now the CLMRG, that's like a tongue fall on itself, but it's the China Lake Mountain Rescue Group, right?
Yes.
All right. Now China Lake is the ones who go up into the mountains and do rescue, and they've been around at least since the 60s.
Yep.
They've been a long time. And then we also have the IWV Rescue, which does the mine rescue. And China Lake is the one that works in the mountains, and they have a summer program. It's actually pretty intensive. I think it's like, once a week for a couple months maybe?
I think they have a one classroom session a week and maybe a one outdoor session a week with 1 or 2 weekend trips possibly.
Right, that sounds right. Because I've looked at that group and considered it myself. It just never fit into my schedule. And so every summer there's an opportunity where somebody who wants to learn how to do it the right way and the safe way can get with that group, have classroom time as well as outdoor real experience, and learn how to climb in a safe environment.
Right.
And that would be absolutely the best way to train. The next one, I guess if you're the 10-year-old kid, right, is you get out with friends and you have to rely on some trust and some proper training and have some good common sense as you're getting out there. Now, obviously there's all this gear and you're not using all of it. You didn't bring all of it with you. There must be different types of rock climbing where you're not using as much gear or you're using more gear. What's the one that would be like the least amount of gear?
Okay, so that would be sport climbing, or bouldering actually, because bouldering all you need is shoes and a chalk bag. And that's all you, and maybe a pad to land on in case you fall.
So bouldering is basically you're taking a boulder, a couple boulders, and you're looking at that, what's the best way to approach it, and you're freestyling without a lot of equipment. You're just going to try to get
there's no equipment at all, just shoes and chalk for your hands, and you're just trying to get up to the top of it, basically.
All right, so bouldering would be the simplest as far as equipment. I mean, how is that as far as the style? Is that actually harder, easier, or?
It's you need the similar techniques with all the types of climbing, but it's just easier to get started by bouldering because you don't need much to do it. You don't need any equipment.
All right, so we're getting ready to go to a break, but all this bouldering is reminding us of the great trogs of the Burroughs Pass, where we were rolling boulders down at the buses from visiting schools back in the 80s. But we're going to go to break. This is Ridgecrest Talk, and we'll be back right after this. And welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk. Your host Paul VanderWerf talking rock climbing with Jerome Weber. Having a little bit of local humor with the Burroughs High School tradition back in I think it was the late 70s. The schools down in the Canyon, Hart, Saugus, Newhall area, Magic Mountain, would complain that we were having nothing to do out here but be troglodytes. The local trogs were rolling boulders down on their buses, and I guess as a rock climber, being a Burroughs student as well, you're getting closer to being a trog than some of the other people in the community. But aside with the joking, we talk about bouldering as kind of being an early step without a lot of equipment, where you're really just looking at how you're going to approach a smaller rock or boulder, and you're going to approach that without a lot of equipment. You're just going to have your shoes, your hands, some chalk so you don't lose your grip, and you're going to climb right up that. And I imagine that can be quite challenging. And it's probably a good lesson before you go into the next more equipment-intensive techniques. So what would the next one of those be?
Okay, so sport climbing is the first type of rope climbing you'd probably do. It's when the bolts are already in the rock, and all you have to do is clip a quick draw to it. So you just clip a quick draw to a hanger that's on a bolt in the rock, and clip your rope to this, and that will keep you protected. That doesn't take very much gear. Yes, you need a harness and a rope and a dozen of these quick draws or so, but it's still relatively cheap compared to some other types of climbing.
Right. Now, if you were to get together with, say, 3 friends to go up on a sport climb, would that already be set up when you got there, or would one person set that up and get it ready?
Most of the sport climbs are already set up. The bolts are there. One person would go up first and typically come down, and then the others would go up.
That would be a double check for safety, basically.
Yeah.
Right. Because I remember actually over at China Lake, I don't know if everybody has access, but they have a indoor rock climbing facility that's only open, certain times, like on a Wednesday night, or I'm not sure what their hours are now. But I had taken my girls there to see what their interest in rock climbing was. And there was a certain amount of safety that you would go through. Like you said, you would climb up and then come back down first. And so with a sport climb, you would probably have one of your more experienced climbers go up first?
Typically, it depends on how hard the climb is. But yes, you typically have somebody who knows what they're doing go up there and set up a top rope for the other people.
And would that be typically like what you said, your dad and you had done that first time? Was it something similar to that?
Yeah, some local climbers kept us safe and set up some ropes for us and let us have at it.
Okay. And so typically how high might, say if I'm a novice and I decided, I called you up, hey Jerome, let's go sport climbing this weekend. How high might we climb on a typical climb?
I'd probably be able to take you up a couple hundred feet.
A couple hundred feet?
A couple hundred feet.
And that's kind of at the novice level.
It's not about how high you go, it's about how difficult the terrain. So
I guess if you're one of those people that are scared of heights and looking back, it's probably not the best sport for you.
It's something you can get used to.
Right.
I was very scared of heights for a long time.
And after a point, you start getting used to that?
And even climbing, yeah, multi-pitch climbing, going up 1,000 feet, scared the crap out of me. And
see, I've always had that theory, which is something just as growing up, is there's a certain adventure in that fear. And so a lot of us do kind of the extreme sports or extreme activities because you like that rush and that adrenaline, that energy that goes along with something that has a certain amount of danger, although you're not being reckless with that. And so a sport climb could go up as high as 200 feet, and it could be rated, just like you said, like a 5.7 or 5.8. Whereabouts would you go? Could you go as little as, like, say, 20 miles from Ridgecrest and find those? Or
oh, yeah. There's many sport climb areas really close by. Pearsonville has several, 2 or 3 areas with about 20 climbs apiece. Great Falls has several dozen climbs out by Trona. And Fossil Falls, there's sport climbing at Fossil Falls. Probably one of the best places, it's a little bit further away, is the Alabama Hills at Lone Pine, because it has a lot of easier climbs for
right, I didn't even think about Alabama Hills. For those of you who aren't familiar with Alabama Hills, Lone Pine's 60 miles north once you get to Inyokern, taking 395 just straight up, and as you get into Lone Pine, right in the middle of town is that left turn on Mount Whitney Road, and as you're driving up towards the Whitney Portal, but before you get up into the mountains, you have these wonderful boulders that are up there. There's tons of them. They have movies that have been shot there, all kinds of great stuff. But I imagine rock climbing at Alabama Hills would give you a totally different appreciation for that. So we've talked about bouldering, we've talked about sport climbing. Are there any other types of climbing that you're doing?
Yeah, there's trad climbing and ice climbing, which I don't do. But trad climbing is when you use the cams and the nuts and put your own protection in the rock where there is none to keep yourself safe.
All right, so we talked a little bit about how you can get some training, different types, some of the local places to go. Now, what about the difference, say, when it's summer and winter? Is there a difference in how you're approaching the hikes and the terrain at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being in the valley in the summertime can be pretty warm, so we typically escape up into the mountains to find the cooler weather. And places like County Line Crags and Speedway Corridor up above Pearsonville are facing south, so they're in the sun all day. So we typically hit those places up in the wintertime.
Right. I'm looking at the calendar. It's October, and it's 94 degrees yesterday in Ridgecrest, and I'm just thinking, that's too hot. And so all you have to do is just grab that gear, get in the vehicle, and within 60 miles or so, you're up into a mountain destination that come January and February, you're not going to go up there.
Absolutely. Kennedy Meadows is a really popular one, too, around here.
All right. We're kind of getting ready to wind down here. We've talked a little bit about some of the safety, some of the ways to get connected. Let's talk more about that. If you're sitting at home, whether you're a kid or an adult, and you want to get out and get involved, and I can imagine a whole family coming along where maybe the kids are climbing or the teenagers are climbing, and maybe not the whole family's actively involved, but they're all coming up for it. How do those people get involved? How do you guys stay connected?
We have email lists that go around. A lot of it's just word of mouth, and just friends of friends. Like 4 or 5 of the people I climb with every week, I've only known for about a year or a year and a half, and they're just introduced through other climbing friends, and they all had no experience before that. So
it sounds like first thing I do is tell somebody to go down to Todd's, check out the gear, check out the safety, check out the equipment, check out to see who they have. And it's not as organized as some of the other sports where you can just go down to the city and sign up, but it is easy enough to get connected with people. And it looks like it's a great activity. It's good for the environment. It's good for your attitude, obviously. You look like you're young and having fun and enjoying the outdoors. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. This is Ridgecrest Talk with your host, Paul VanderWerf, talking about how much Ridgecrest rocks with Jerome Weber, rock climbing in the greater desert and mountain area.
Thank you.